Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar on culture, accountability, and execution, how to build a high-performance team that delivers. This is an exciting one because this is one of our only webinars that we've done this year on more of a leadership topic. So hopefully you guys are excited to dive in. On today's webinar, we're going to go over a few key points. We're going to talk about the most common people challenges in a field service business, which I'm sure you are all more than familiar with. We're going to talk about the importance of being a people and culture-centric organization. We're going to dive into the Entrepreneurial Operating System, EOS, if any of you are familiar with that. And then we're going to talk about how to start building a high-performance team that delivers. A little bit about me for those of you who have never met me or talked with me or seen me on a webinar before. My name is Rachel Betterbid. Most people at Coalmarch just call me RB. We've got, I want to say 4 Rachels at this point. So if you've ever heard of, if you're a Coalmarch customer, you've ever heard anyone talk about RB, that's me. I'm the VP of digital marketing here at Coalmarch, and I oversee our digital marketing teams. I've built several service teams from the ground up. Granted, they're a little bit different service teams than I'm sure you guys are familiar with, more on the digital marketing side. But I've been in leadership and management for a while, and I've managed both directly and indirectly over 50 people, in my time here. And it's something I'm super, super passionate about. And while I'm not an EOS expert or an implementer, Coalmarch has implemented EOS into our business over the last 7 or so years. So I do know a little bit about that. And yeah, really my biggest professional passion is definitely in leadership and building successful teams, managing people, building systems. So this is something that is very near and dear to my heart and something that I'm really passionate about. So hopefully that comes through in today's webinar. But to start things off, let's talk about and acknowledge the unique people challenges that are there when you are running a field service business. And really, there are people challenges in general when you are running any sort of service operation, right? Because so much of delivering services relies on people. So I'm curious to hear from you guys what you struggle with the most in your business related to people, whether it's hiring good talent, retaining good employees, getting that consistent execution and accountability from the team that you have, or maintaining, a positive and engaging team culture. Let's see, so far, hiring good talent, not too surprising. I would say that is one that in my experience as well is definitely a top one. But hope, probably most of you have struggled with all of these things in one way or another. Some of the more specific, unique challenges, I would say, to a field service business, which again, all of these are going to ring true to you guys, I'm sure, and you know it. As we just talked about, hiring good talent, acquiring good quality of talent is very hard, especially, when we're talking about field service, home services. Applicants may lack experience or long-term interest in the field. There's a lot of high turnover, especially if you're hiring a lot of entry-level people, lower salaries, or even seasonal workers. The labor pool is shared with a lot of other industries, lawn, pest, HVAC, plumbing, things like that. So you're sharing that labor pool, and with that comes expectations around competitive pay. But you may struggle to find a matching skill set or attitude with people who are looking for higher pay than you're able to pay to remain profitable as an organization. And ultimately, really, there just is a limited pipeline of workers that are seeking trade or service-based careers after high school. And so all in all, it's a very challenging pool to have to contend with. But also the nature of the role can also make it challenging, right? Especially when we're talking lawn and pest, working outside, it can be physically demanding. Outdoor labor can deter people, especially in the summer heat, depending on regionally where you are. There's a lot of repetitive work, right? There may not be a ton of advancement paths beyond field, initial entry-level field roles. But at the same time, it does require someone to be client facing and customer facing, right? So there is a certain set of soft skills that they have to have. But all in all, this kind of job can be viewed as just that, just a job versus maybe a long-term career path. And there can be a disconnect between technicians or people that are in the field and, in-office teams. And that in itself can create silos within your organization or resentment. The environment is also very challenging, right? Because people in field service are out in the field, literally, they're in their cars. There is that lack of, real-time supervision that companies like Coalmarch doesn't have to contend with when we have an office and everyone's working together, right? Like that in itself can create accountability issues, and it can make it harder to coach employees, mentor them, reinforce your company values, because you just aren't getting as much face time with them. And then, because of that, there can be inconsistent execution and delivery and upselling across your technicians. Your technicians can feel disconnected from the rest of the company because they are not getting that face time with everyone else aside from just their manager. And all in all, that can lead to miscommunication. So lastly, if you are in more of a seasonal business regionally, and you do have to lay people off in the off season, or you don't have people that are working year round, especially more for lawn, that can be very hard to maintain a consistent talent pool within your organization. And also just from a workflow perspective, your technicians may feel super overwhelmed during peak season working longer hours, but then it's super, super slow and there's not that year-round balance. And so hiring surges during your busy season can, we've all been here where it's kind of forced you to hire really fast, and you either rush onboarding, you hire the wrong people, or there ends up being training gaps because you just kind of need people to get in, butt in the seat, fill those routes. And also the seasonality nature, if you do, lay people off in the off season, which I think in general, the industry is trying to move away from that because it just does not lend to having, a good, consistent team year round, but that can be challenging from a hiring perspective. So I'm sure again that all of these are resonating with you guys because there are just inherently a lot of people challenges within your businesses. And so as a leader, whether you're a manager, whether you're the CEO, the owner, the founder, whatever, hiring can feel very, very hard, no matter how much we do it, right? No matter how big of a company we are, no matter, how much experience we have with it, it's just inherently a hard thing for us to do. And it can feel very unpredictable and somewhat out of our control to also retain good people. We feel like no matter what, people are going to want to move on. They're going to want to do other things. And, the good people don't always stay. And that just is kind of part of life, right? But even, when you hire well-intentioned people that have, they have good intentions, they want to do good work, it still can be really, really hard to get consistent execution out of your team. And then in turn, it kind of can feel like culture is created by the group of people that you employ and the group of people that you hire, and not, you as a leader. And sometimes that can feel somewhat out of our control. But the reality of the situation is that culture doesn't happen by accident. It needs to happen by design. And the most successful companies that are, outpacing you, that are outgrowing you, that are performing you, outperforming you, they don't treat people as just a problem to solve. Maybe some of them do, and maybe some of them have just lucked out and they've been successful by treating people as an afterthought and not having a great culture. But at the end of the day, those aren't the people that are going to last long-term and that aren't going to be sustainable. You really need to, in a service business, treat your people as the foundation that you use to build upon. And you need to establish that positive culture and facilitate alignment, not just to, reduce headaches and people problems, but to unlock that consistency, accountability, and long-term growth in your employees, which will lead to long-term growth for your company. And so all in all, people aren't a distraction from your business. They are your business. And I think on some level, we all know that, right? It can be hard day to day to actually prioritize that. And also, what do I actually do? I know that, but what do I do? And we'll get into that. So let's talk about what being a people and culture centric organization means, because I think there's some fluff and shallow, ways to perceive that versus what it actually looks like day to day. So, obviously in a field service business, there's so many elements of your business that are essential to run, whether it's equipment, whether it's software, but the one that can win or lose every single day is the human one, the people one. And so being a people centric organization when you are a service business is essential, because especially, if you're in the lawn and pest business, your delivery and your customer retention, which we know the better retention you have, the easier it is going to be for you to grow long term. That rides on your people. Culture is the operating system that turns process into good performance. You can have all the great processes in the world, but if you don't have the right people, that's not going to lend to great performance from each of your employees. But really, a strong team is the bedrock for growth, profit, and if you're interested, potential exit value as well, in a very overcrowded market, which we know the lawn care and pest control industry in specifically are. There's a lot of companies that are doing the exact same thing, that are all seeking, the same thing, which is growth and being successful. So again, let's talk about what culture really means in your company, because I do think it is often misconstrued. Culture is the unwritten rules of how your team behaves when no one is watching. So it's not about the slogans. It's not about what's on the wall. It's not the fun events. It's not if you have a ping pong table. It's really about the daily attitudes, decisions, and behaviors that are accepted and encouraged within your organization. And those behaviors and attitudes are what shape how your team works together, how they serve their customers, and ultimately how your company succeeds, and if they do. So as far as what it's not just about being nice. Strong culture does require authenticity. It requires honesty, constructive feedback, high standards. It doesn't, it's not just being nice, because being nice does not equal good performance. It's also not about the perks, right? It's not just about free lunches or swag. Perks are important and they have a role in your culture, but they are not your culture. Those aren't the type of things that create long-term loyalty and buy-in or good performance from your team. They're kind of just the icing on the cake. So they can't be the foundation of what your culture is. It's also not what the owner says that it is. Culture isn't something that can just be declared. It's something that needs to be demonstrated. It needs to be upheld, and it needs to come from the top down. It's also not a mission statement in a binder, right? It's not something that you write down, you talk about when someone first starts, or even, once every couple of years. It's really something that needs to be actively used and talked about in your hiring, in your training, in your firing, which is unfortunately a part of the process. If you don't do that, it's meaningless. It's just words on a paper. And then lastly, it's, again, not something that happens by luck. It needs to be very intentional, and it needs to be intentionally designed. It needs to be intentionally and actively managed. So when we talk about what that actually looks like, it's going to be how your technicians treat customers, or really the general public, when no one is there watching or listening. It's, whether your team members help each other or whether they throw each other under the bus. It's how people, both leadership and frontline employees, react when mistakes are made. It's whether your office staff communicates respectfully with technicians and vice versa. It's if your leaders and you follow through on what you say you're going to do. It's if you guys as leaders, hold yourself accountable to the same standards that you hold everyone else to. It's what behaviors your leaders reward and what behaviors you don't accept. And ultimately, it's what your worst employee can get away with and what your best employee gets rewarded with. So when we talk about some examples, again, I think with everything, all of this conceptually makes sense, but I always like to kind of bring it back to your business and what that looks like. So culture and practice, an example situation can be a technician driving your company car, right? In a weak culture, maybe you have a technician that drives erratically, they cut people off, they park in spots that are inconvenient, block other homeowners, really just generally inconsiderate. Whereas a strong culture would be they understand and are aware of the fact that when they are driving a company car, when they have a uniform on, they understand that they are a reflection of your business, and therefore they are aware of their actions in public, and they take accountability and ownership of the responsibility that they carry, and they understand that. Another example situation could be your CSR hears complaints from current customers about your technicians. A weak culture would be they shrug it off. It's not really their problem. Whereas a strong culture would be they take ownership to the customer, even though it wasn't their wrongdoing. They apologize, they make it right, and they take the next step to follow, internal resolution processes and escalate it to the right people to ensure that problems don't continue happening, but not, in a throwing someone under the bus kind of way. Another situation, hiring decision in weak cultures. Hiring fast, independently, not bringing people into the mix. You're not really doing it with intention, right? You're kind of just hiring to fill a route. Whereas a strong culture would be you're hiring very intentionally. You're thinking about it proactively. You're thinking about what you need in someone. You're aligning it with your core values. And you're also including other people in the process to get their buy-in, so that it's not just an independent decision made by a leader. Lastly, another example situation could be, an employee makes a mistake due to either lack of training, lack of resources, or documentation. This is inevitable. No matter how much great documentation you have, people are going to make mistakes. In a weak culture, a leader would blame and punish the employee because they think they should have known better. Whereas in a strong culture, a leader gives grace. And again, this is more if this stuff just happens versus if it's a repeated pattern. That's obviously a different situation. But using that as a learning experience to set better expectations proactively, have better processes and documentation, and be more proactive in how you train people and how to handle situations. So at what point in another, I'm sure we've all resonate with the weak culture. We've all been there. If you've run a business for more than a couple of years, you've probably gone through phases where you've had weaker cultures and where you've had stronger cultures, and that's completely normal. It's part of the business process of running a business. So what does being a people-centric organization not mean? Because again, I think like culture, it can get misconstrued often. And so making sure that we're on the same page, that when we talk about being a people-centric organization, it does not mean prioritizing individual people over what is best for the company. It also does not mean letting strong performers off the hook just because they're really good at their job if they're harming culture or morale. It's not avoiding conflict to keep the peace, especially when performance suffers. It's not tolerating inconsistency or underperformance in the name of loyalty. It's great to be loyal to your employees, but again, if it's at the detriment of your organization, that does not mean you are a people-centric organization, because no one is going to succeed if the business isn't succeeding. It's also not confusing perks and friendliness with accountability and leadership. Those are separate entities, and you can be people-centric, but still hold your people accountable and still demonstrate strong leadership while, encouraging ownership and accountability. So this is what it doesn't mean. Again, I'm sure all of these, we've all been guilty of doing these things at one point or another in our journey of being business owners or being in a leadership position, management position. But let's talk about what it actually means. It means putting people at the core of your business, but again, never above the business. At the end of the day, what's best for the business needs to come first, but the people need to be at the core of those decisions. It also means designing roles that have, clear expectations, responsibilities, having systems that will set people up to succeed in their roles. It means holding everyone, especially leadership, but including leadership, accountable to whatever those shared standards are across your organization. It's building a culture where feedback, growth, and performance are rewarded, and creating consistency across your employees so that you don't have to rely on heroic effort from individuals, right? If you have individuals that you think the business would crumble without, that means that you're probably lacking consistency across all of your employees, and that's not necessarily a good thing. It also means rewarding behaviors that strengthen the team and move the company forward, and really putting those core values at the forefront of your hiring decisions, your training, and just really your daily decision-making as a leader. So what are some of the common pitfalls with people and culture in a service organization? Again, I'm sure many of these will ring true to you all. These are some of the ones that I have even just witnessed. Again, I'm not in a field service organization, but I work at a service organization, and a lot of these ring true here as well. The first one is a psychological concept that's called cognitive dissonance, which is essentially refers to the mental discomfort that happens when someone's behaviors kind of contradict with what they think their values are. So examples of this could be a business owner believes that one of their values is accountability and holding people accountable, but in actuality, they are conflict avoidant and they avoid confronting underperforming employees and kind of just let them get away with it. Or another example could be a leader that thinks that they're a great leader, but they don't listen to the team feedback. They don't take people's feedback into consideration, right? And when someone knows that their beliefs do not align with their behaviors, it puts them on edge, and it doesn't make them in a spot to hear, constructive criticism and to be their best self as a leader. So that cognitive dissonance is something that you have to very much be aware of, and it requires a lot of self-awareness as a leader. Another thing that we see a lot is a lack of intention. So we've kind of already talked about this, right? Whether you're rushed to hire or you're just not being very intentional with solving a long-term problem, you're more focused on solving a short-term problem. This may look like prioritizing speed over fit when you're hiring someone. It may look like ignoring red flags in interviews because you're just so desperate to hire. It may mean you just don't have a lot of clarity on the kind of person that would thrive in your culture or that would thrive in that role, and therefore you hire people that drag it down. We see a lot of lack of clarity as well. So if people aren't clear on their responsibilities or what success looks like in their role, you're kind of leaving it up to them to decide what is good enough. And when you leave it up to people to decide, that's not always a good thing, right? Team members just do what they think is enough because expectations were never clearly defined for them. And that's when frustration, finger pointing, when things do fall through the cracks can come up because everyone's not operating on the same understanding of what is expected. And an example of this could be multiple people within an organization kind of own a task or an outcome, but there's really no clear owner. And therefore you've got a lot of people that are kind of half owning it and no one is really owning the full thing. Other things that we see, lack of accountability. So when no one's held accountable, again, and that standard isn't excellence, it's whatever someone can get away with, it can create a breeding ground for mediocrity, which, that means your underperforming employees tend to be the ones that stay, and then your top performers are the ones that tend to leave. If your leaders are spending more time managing excuses than outcomes, that's usually a sign that there may be an accountability issue within your culture. And in this, this kind of culture, good enough becomes the cultural norm and standard. And there's really not a lot of incentive to strive for great. Avoidance, we're all humans. We all, most people don't like tough conversations. We don't like making hard decisions, but some people are really risk avoidant. Some people are really non-confrontational. And so this kind of culture can create confusion and resentment, and it doesn't encourage fast problem solving and relationship repair. And, what this can look like is letting your underperformers slide just to keep the peace, and avoiding, giving people direct, clear feedback because it feels uncomfortable or risky, or like the relationship will hurt, especially if there's someone that you do want to keep long term. Or this could just look like delaying decisions, keeping toxic people on board because you're just putting off making a hard decision because the work that will come from that. And I always like to say, is it the right kind of hard or the wrong kind of hard? The right kind of hard is, it's going to create a lot of work, but it's best long term. And the wrong kind of hard may be, it's not the kind of hard that's really worth it in the long run. A lot of times we put off decisions that are the right kind of hard. And then lastly, favoritism. When you build your company around specific people, again, at the expense of what is best for your business, you do kind of create a breeding ground for favoritism, and that sacrifices consistency and trust and long-term scale within your organization. So what this looks like is making exceptions for certain employees that maybe other people would be penalized for, or creating roles, schedules, rules around specific people, letting loyalty outweigh performance in your decision-making. Favoritism in general is definitely something that it's easy, to happen when you think you're all about your people, right? You bend the business to specific people, and that's not always a good thing. So these are a lot of common pitfalls. Again, I hope they don't sound familiar to you. I hope they don't resonate with you, but if I'm guessing, they probably do. So how do you prevent or fix these issues in your business? That's kind of the question, right? And there's no perfect recipe. There's no perfect formula, but there are some good frameworks to work around. And a really good one is the Entrepreneurial Operating System. So we're going to kind of go through the high level components of that, but really dive into the people element. So for those of you who aren't familiar, EOS, you may have heard that acronym. The Entrepreneurial Operating System is essentially just like a simple framework for running a business that is really centered around clarity, accountability, alignment across the entire organization. And this business framework or model, whatever you want to call it, was created by Gino Wickman and was introduced in the book Traction, Get a Grip on Your Business, which was a best-selling book, still is to this day, launched in 2007. So I'm curious to hear from you guys, those of you who are currently utilizing EOS in your business. Not yet. Yeah. What's EOS? Yeah. Well, hey, this is a good topic for you then. Hopefully this will be new information and it'll be helpful. But okay, so we don't sort of dabbled. Yeah, I understand that. So we don't have anyone that is fully using it, which is good because then this information is probably going to be new to you, which is a good thing. Hopefully this stuff will resonate. Okay, we've got some now that are running EOS and loving it. We could have a whole webinar on EOS, so we're not going to really talk about all the different components because there's just not nearly enough time in the day. But we'll kind of go over high level the core components of EOS. It's very much centered upon these 6 core elements of a business, right? So the first one is vision, and the concept of that is getting everyone in your business on the same page with where your company's going, you know, what your long-term vision is, what your mission is, and how you're going to get there. So examples of this, core values are definitely part of the mix. Having a defined mission and vision of where you're going, what your marketing strategy is for how you plan to get there, having a 10-year target, having a 3-year picture, and then having a 1-year plan. And then also having quarterly rocks for your yearly plan. So we'll go into some of these elements, but not so much on the vision side. But the one that we're going to talk about the most is people. And the concept is really ensuring that you have the right people in the right seats that are aligned with your core values. And examples of this are having accountability charts by role, having, again, clear definition of what each role looks like, what an A player would look like in every role. Data, the concept is running the business on facts and numbers, not emotions and opinions. Of course, I think emotions and opinions have a role in a business, but it's not, you know, making big decisions solely around emotions and opinions. It's really honing in on the numbers and leveraging data to help you make better decisions. So having KPIs, not just as a business, but for every role, having scorecards, regularly looking at the data within your business. Issues, which is the concept is identifying and solving problems really quickly and solving them at the root. So examples of this mean having regular meetings, one-on-ones, problem solving pretty much at all levels, not just at the leadership level. Process is another really big component. So documenting and having documentation around the most important, you know, things that happen within your business, and that being the way that you create consistency and execution. So that's going to be SOPs, documentation, processes, and then, you know, having accountability around you have these processes, is your team using them, and are they being kept up to date? And then the last one, all of this is in the hopes that you gain traction, right? It's the hope that you actually instill discipline and accountability in your team, and you do that through regular rhythms. And examples of that could be having short-term goals that lead to the long-term goals. So 90-day rocks, kind of clear paths of what you're focusing on in smaller increments of time, having structured meetings where you talk about these things regularly. But again, I could have, you know, an entire webinar around these core components. The one that we're really going to focus on the most is going to be the people element. And really the concept here is having the right people in the right seats. And we're going to kind of go through what that means. So the right people mean the people that are aligned with your core values at the foundation. It's people that have a set of shared values. Chaos ensues in any environment, whether it's professional, personal, familial, whatever, romantic situations, when there's a misalignment of values. When people are working together, interpersonally mixing together, and they don't have those same values, that's where problems and tension comes from. So, you know, to avoid issues, you're never going to completely avoid them because we're humans. But really the foundation of this needs to be that the right people are the people that align with the values. They think, they act, and they behave in ways that reflect what your business stands for. So they live your values when no one's watching, they fit your culture, and they don't just not detract from your culture, but they actually add to it, and they add to the dynamic. They're a long-term match for how your company operates and where you see your company going. And really, at the end of the day, they're the people that, looking back 2 years down the line, you would enthusiastically rehire, knowing what you know about them. If you've ever hired someone or you have someone on board that you're like, if I knew now, you know, if I knew then what I knew now, I probably wouldn't hire them, but it's also not bad enough to fire them. They're probably not the right person if you wouldn't actually enthusiastically rehire them. And then there's the right seat. And that means the person is in a role that really aligns with their natural strengths, skills, shortcomings, and emotional and physical capacity. So how you kind of determine the right seat, and we'll go into more of this, is do they get it? Do they want it? And do they have the capacity to do the job? So why do you need both of these things? Why do you need the right person that is also in the right seat? We'll kind of go through what this looks like and the impact when you have misalignment here. So let's say you have the right person, but they're in the wrong seat. So it's the right person in that they're a great representation of your company culture. They definitely share the same values, but ultimately they're in a job that they're just never gonna fully succeed in. This isn't a good thing. This is what happens a lot. From my experience, I've definitely, we've definitely seen this at Coalmarch. Is, you have someone that you really want to make it work with, but they're not in the right seat, and maybe you don't have another seat for them, or you do have another seat for them, but it's not open right now. But really, this isn't a great situation to be in, because the impact of this is, if they're in the wrong seat, they're never going to get out of that job what you need them to get out of that job, right? Like, they will hurt results no matter what. And they'll feel frustrated, because nobody likes being in a job that they know they're not good at and that is not the right, fit for them. Over time, they'll feel demotivated, they'll lose confidence. All of these things will impact their performance, as well as just maybe, it already not being a good role for them, not feeling confident and feeling bad about themselves. That's just going to make it worse. Let's say the opposite. You have the wrong person. They don't share the same values, but God, they're good at their job. I mean, we see this a lot too. I feel like, especially, you may see this in roles like sales roles or CSRs where, results are a little bit more tangible. You have someone that does get really good results. They are really good at what they do, but they don't share those same values, and they may even be negatively impacting culture and other employees, whether that's like spreading bad attitudes or, treating people without respect, and that kind of thing could create resentment, over the long period across teams and damage your culture. Wrong person, wrong seat. This is just the worst case scenario, right? This is an anchor to your team in every way. This is someone that hurts results. They contribute nothing culturally or performance wise. They detract from everyone else, and they make everyone else's job more difficult. So if there's anyone that's coming to mind for you that you are like, gosh, wrong person, wrong seat, we'll get to it, but that is, make a decision and make it fast. And then the opposite of this, the best case scenario, is the right person in the right seat. This is going to be your dream team. These are the people that are really good at their job. They generate results. They perform well. They grow. They develop over time. They're a good investment of your time. They raise the standards for everyone else. And really, they elevate everyone else, and they raise the standard across the entire company. This is the ideal. This is what, as leaders, we should all strive for. Now, is it realistic to have 100% of your, employees be the right person in the right seat at the same time? Probably not. But the higher that percentage of your employees that are the right people in the right seat, that's what you need to strive for. So let's talk about like an example. Again, I like to talk about it in the confines of, your business, what this looks like. So the right person, the wrong seat. An example of this could be, let's say you do have a long-term lawn or pest technician that is really good at their job, and they've been there a while, and, you need a branch manager, and you like to hire and promote people internally. And it's, again, you think of yourself as a people-centric organization. So you want to reward loyalty, people who have been there for years that are good at their jobs. We'll say Mike hypothetically was a great technician. He was super dependable, very team oriented. He treated your customers great. His customers loved him. He gets promoted, but he starts to really struggle as a manager who manages people because he avoids tough conversations. He's not really confident with setting expectations with his direct reports. He's uncomfortable with making hard decisions. The impacts of this could be his team likes him because let's say they were peers at one point, they've worked with him, but they don't really respect him as a leader, and they're not really getting the direction that they need. He's feeling overwhelmed, frustrated. He's losing confidence because he was a really good technician and he was really confident in that role. Then he's put in a management role that isn't coming naturally to him. And so the business is feeling the drag, but letting him go would feel really wrong because he's been there a while. Again, he was really good at some role at one point and he got promoted because of that. That's not a good situation. An example of wrong person, right seat. Again, let's say you have one of your sales reps, hypothetically Sarah. She closes more monthly revenue than anyone else on the team, but she cuts corners. She talks down about other departments. She spreads negativity. She refuses to use the CRM the way that it's supposed to. All of these bad things, right? But she kind of justifies it with her numbers. The impacts of this is that your office staff feels demoralized and frustrated when working with her. New hires start learning from her, mimicking her bad attitude. Culture as a whole takes a hit, even though business performance and revenue may be strong. This is not a good thing long-term, and it's not sustainable. Wrong person, wrong seat. You hire Tom as a technician because they had prior pest control experience, but he shows up late. He complains constantly. He doesn't follow processes. He gets defensive with customers. He doesn't respect team standards. Overall, this is just bad, right? The impacts, routes are getting rerouted due to callbacks. Teammates are frustrated. They have to clean up after his mistakes. He's dragging down morale, performance. This is just a no-brainer. And then the right person, right seat. Let's say Tasha started as a CSR. She's worked at the company for a while. She was a really great CSR, but she also demonstrated, things that shows she would be a great leader, strong communication, empathy, taking initiative. Over time, she naturally starts mentoring your new CSRs, aligning, sales messaging with marketing, finding new ways to leverage your CRM. Over time, leaders see her ability to connect the dots between customer experience and revenue, and she gets promoted to director of sales. The positive impacts are she can bridge a cultural gap from her team to other leaders because she did their job, right? There's a lot of inherent respect because she knows the struggle of their role. She's done it. And also she's able to influence them because of this. Her team respects her. She uses her influence to develop their skills, get their buy-in, hold them accountable, basically create many versions of herself. And this is the gold standard. This is what we want to emulate across all different roles in our organization, the right person in the right seat. So talked about this before, get it, want it, capacity to do it. Let's dive a little bit further into that and kind of what that actually looks like. So GWC, if you've ever, again, heard that acronym, it's from EOS, it's from Traction, and it stands for get it, want it, capacity to do it. And this is basically the framework in which you should use to decide if someone's in the right seat. So this isn't necessarily the framework that you use to decide, are they the right person, but more, are they in the right seat? And the first one is, do they get it? Do they understand their role? It's not just about, training, years of experience. It's really about intuition, wiring. Do they grasp what is needed for the job? And do you have to constantly re-explain things to them over time, or are they sharp? Do they immediately get it? Do they understand the function, the pace, the pressure? Can they see around corners, so to speak, and really anticipate what's needed? Do they work well with other people in related departments? Do they really just understand what it means to be good at their job and what their job is at a high level? Want it. As it sounds, do they want it? Do they have intrinsic motivation? This isn't about pressure. It's not about opportunity. It's about intrinsic motivation. Are they excited about the role and the responsibilities? Do they choose the seat versus just being placed there? Can they accept the demands, stress, and challenges it brings? They don't need convincing or coaxing. They're all in. They're excited. And this is where this can be hard to find for a job that maybe isn't as appealing, but the right person will still see it as a stepping stone, and they should still want it. And so for entry-level roles, it may be like, oh, well, who's ever going to want this role? Because it's more mundane, repetitive work. But again, the right person will want it because they will see it as a stepping stone and they will see it as a path to something greater. And then lastly, do they have the capacity to do it? This one can be the trickiest and the hardest to really measure because it's physical and it's also emotional and mental. It's about capability, resources, stamina. It can tie in with get it in the sense that, like, do they have inherent skills and weaknesses that align with the role? Can they manage the pace and the complexity of the work? And really, do they have the emotional capacity to give it their full effort and to naturally be good at the job? Or do they have to work really, really hard to even be the bare minimum? But also time can be an element. Let's say with time, with training, they could have the capacity, but the business isn't at a place where they have 5 years to wait, right? So time can definitely be a resource that we're talking about with capacity as well. But yeah, can they grow into the role without burning out or falling behind? And can they do it at a rate that the organization needs it? How can get it, want it capacity look different by role? Lawn technician, so getting it could be understanding just the general workflow, right? Routing, treatment protocols, customer interaction. They grasp the importance of safety, consistency, attention to detail. They can grasp the complexity of grass. Want it would be they enjoy being out in the field. They like being on the go. They're interested in the subject matter. They want to do well. They're not afraid to, physical labor and doing hard work. Capacity could be someone who is physically able, right? That can be on the go. It's someone that has a driver's license that can drive around. It's someone that can communicate well with people, since that's a part of the job. It's someone that can read and follow directions and protocol. It's someone who has the capacity to kind of think on their feet and diagnose issues, recommend solutions. And really, because the job is, as we talked about earlier, not very supervised, there needs to be an element of they're intrinsically motivated and accountable, meaning they can stay on track within themselves without someone forcing them to. Whereas for a customer service rep, this is going to look totally different. Get it can be understanding, scheduling, dispatching, call flow, knowing a little bit about everything, knowing, how their tone and their accuracy can affect the overall customer experience and how it can also impact field operations. Someone wanting it would be someone that genuinely likes talking to people, solving problems, helping people, staying organized, someone who's motivated by efficiency, collaboration, happy customers, right? This want it could look completely different than the want it of a technician. Same with capacity. Emotionally, there's someone that maybe has to be more steady because they're dealing with a lot of upset customers. It's someone that can process and remember a lot of information very easily. It's someone that is sociable, that likes to talk to people all day long. Not everyone has the emotional capacity to be on the phone all day long, and that just is what it is. And then with leadership as well, this can look completely different. So getting it for, like, let's say the VP of operations, it would be someone who understands how all departments work together, understands how they need to drive the business forward and what their role is with that. Someone who can identify bottlenecks, inefficiencies, gaps in systems. Wanting it would be someone that is really driven to lead, wants to impact others. They're motivated by decision making. They're motivated by influencing people. They can really thrive in a dynamic environment that's ever changing. They like working with people. And then capacity wise, it's someone that kind of can manage all that needs to be managed when you are a VP of operations. They can support people. They can support processes at scale. They can make fast, grounded decisions. They can, thinking strategically comes very naturally to them. They can just mentally handle the pressure of what is needed in their role, not just all the things we talked about, but also having hard conversations, coaching people, delegating things. So as you can see, the get it, want it capacity, it will look different role to role, even slightly. And it's really important for you as leader to understand what that looks like. So how to get started. We're 42 minutes in. We have 18 minutes left. I have not looked at any of the mostly just Katie in here, but yeah, if anyone has any questions, any thoughts, feel free to pop them in throughout. But this is the hard part, right? Of like, we know all of this conceptually, all of this makes sense. How do we actually get started? And, this is going to sound very easy, three-part step, but there's a lot that goes into this and we'll go into it. But really the first thing is establishing the foundation and the guiding principles that will dictate all of your decisions moving forward. And then from there, evaluating your current team to identify gaps and make both short-term and long-term plans, and then implementing a system of ongoing evaluation, taking all of this into consideration. So we'll kind of dive into all of these and kind of how to take it one step at a time. So again, the first step is really establishing the foundation of all of this, of your core values, of what you're looking for, guiding principles that are going to be there to help you make every decision moving forward. The first step is definitely going to be clarifying your core values. So if you have an organization that has had the same core values forever, it's always good to take a look at them and make sure that they still are aligned with, what they were when you first started. And sometimes I think leaders can rush through this process of just setting core values, maybe choosing very basic ones that could apply to any company, and they're not really representative of the true culture of your organization. But a good way to do this is to kind of identify the best of your best as far as employees go, and really extract common themes as far as their behavior, their attitudes, what they do, what makes them the best of the best, and kind of test it against your current core values and the rest of your team. Like that may be something that, again, maybe your core values are a little bit more basic and they're not as specific to your organization. So it's a good process to kind of go through let's really extract those and then test them against what we do have, and do those need to evolve in any way. It's really important to be super, super clear with your core values. I think the impact of them will be a lot more and a lot more significant if they're not just very basic, like accountability is a core value. Like, that's very basic. What does that actually mean? And really naming it specifically. But creating them is just the first part. You need to actually create systems and practices to reinforce them constantly, to talk about them constantly with your team. But yeah, core values are really the foundation of establishing these principles. But also vision and goals is a big part of it, right? Like having clarity on where your company is going and, a high level overview of how you plan to get there and how each function within the organization can best support that vision and that mission and really where you're trying to go. So that at the very least should be having, a very clear, measurable 1 year, 3 year, and 5 year plan and goals along with that, if you don't already have that. Leadership alignment is really important. So needing to, you need to get your leadership team, if you have other leaders other than you, maybe as the CEO, you need to get buy-in on those company core values and the vision and goals. And you all need to work together to define what those standards look like and what those deal breakers are and what are the expectations that you have from all of your employees. And you guys need to be aligned on that. And you need to establish consistency and set expectations. And really collectively, how do we get more consistent with how we hire people, how we promote people, like internally, how we coach people, and ultimately like how we make people decisions. All of your leaders need to be on the same page with that, because if one team is really looking at their core values when they're hiring, but another team isn't, that's still going to create resentment because you're going to have different standards across teams. So this leadership alignment is very, very critical to being successful with this. And then role clarity. And that means this, I'll say it in my next slide, of this part could take you 6 months. Like this, I'm not trying to make it sound like this is a quick thing to do, because this is the most important thing you can do. And you really shouldn't rush the process. But having role clarity on every single role in your organization, as far as what skills, traits, and natural strengths are required on a role by role basis, and really figuring out what are we willing to train on versus what does someone need to enter and walk through the door with, and what are the skills that are non-negotiable versus what are the ones that we can train more on. And those are imperative to know for every single role. Every manager needs to have a clear picture of what that looks like for the roles that they're responsible for and that they're hiring for and that they're managing for. Another good thing is what milestones and growth areas are expected in year one. Depending on what your tenure looks like, how do you expect someone to progress in that role? This can really help to make sure that you're not 3 years down the line and someone is not any better than they were the first month they came through those doors. So really outlining, how you expect to see someone grow. And then that's how you measure someone's performance over time. But yeah, what does success look like ultimately, and how can you quantify it with, KPIs and things like that? So yeah, this is a big thing to do. And so don't rush this process. This could take you a year to do, but you do want to involve your leaders in this process because you want to get their buy-in. And it's something that if you've never really taken the time to do this, like this is where you need to start, because this is what is going to dictate every decision that you make moving forward. So the next step would be, once you go through that process, you do really need to evaluate your current team, who you currently have, and really identify the gaps and make plans. This is the not fun part, right? This is when you have to evaluate your current team and you have to assess them based on your core values. And so there's a few different things that you can do: the core values assessment and the get it, want it capacity assessment to do, again, for every employee. So once you have those core values set and you feel good about them being a really good representation of what your company stands for and how you expect people to treat each other, you're going to go through and you're going to rate every employee based on those core values of, do they consistently demonstrate and uphold those values? Do they sometimes, or do they rarely, live by those values? And that will be eye-opening in itself. And you'll get a pretty clear picture of who is not the right person. And then, the right person, wrong person versus the right seat, wrong seat. To figure out the wrong seat, that's where you can do the get it, want it capacity assessment. So you'll, again, go through defining what getting it, wanting it, and having the capacity to do the job looks like on a role by role basis. And then you will assess every employee with a clear yes or no. And if the answer isn't yes to all three, then they're likely not in the right seat long term. So if they get it and they have the capacity to do it, but they just don't want it, it doesn't really cut it. And then vice versa. If they want it and they have the capacity, but they just, no matter what, they can't get it, you're constantly having to re-explain things, it's still probably the same outcome. And then once you do this, the plans will become visible. Like you won't be able to deny the decisions that you have to make. And granted, not all of the decisions that you have to make, you'll be able to make immediately. You have to first kind of get an assessment for determining like how big are these gaps right now and misalignments. Do we have to rebuild our whole team, or are there just a few people here and there that have the wrong attitude or are really in the wrong seat? And you'll build short-term and long-term plans around that. As far as basically if someone is not in the right seat, then the plan is you either have to let them go or you have to move them to a different seat, and you have to do that over time. They can't stay in that seat. But really this is the hard part, figuring out what decisions to make. And these aren't fun decisions, but you should prioritize decisions that are going to have immediate positive impacts, even if it means more work. Again, is it the right kind of work, the right kind of hard, or is it the wrong kind? But these plans, these could be 2-year plans, right? You might not be able to replace certain team members immediately all at once, and that is completely reasonable and to be expected. So once, you kind of have a lay of the land, you identify the gaps, you create these plans, then it's like, okay, how do you actually, again, hold people accountable? How do you hold your leaders accountable to thinking this way and to making decisions this way? And that's when you have to build systems for ongoing evaluation. And this is all these principles are again, from EOS and from Traction. So one is having regular meetings, all different kinds of meetings, whether that's team meetings, cross-team meetings, leadership meetings, to regularly discuss issues, identify solutions, assign ownership of tasks and resolution of issues. EOS recommends having the same scheduled time for meetings. If it's a team meeting, have it the same day of the week, the same time, even if it's every 2 weeks, every month, whatever, have some consistency there. And also for every meeting, set a meeting agenda and have an owner that is in charge of making sure the meeting stays on track, making sure everyone gets heard, making sure there's clear action items. Promoting discipline, alignment, shared ownership. These are the things that should be reinforced regularly through meetings. One-on-ones are another big one. Again, I think when you're in the field service world, it may not make sense to have a weekly one-on-one with every single direct report, but there needs to be some sort of routine one-on-one and a scheduled touch point for managers to have with their direct reports, one-on-one, not as a group, to coach them, to clarify expectations, to help support them. So even if that frequency is once a month, every 2 weeks, that's up to you to decide what is needed and what is reasonable and a good use of time. Within Coalmarch, we do weekly for most roles. Some roles are bi-weekly, but for the most part, weekly is what we do. And really having this dedicated time can help leaders reinforce, again, those core values. It can help them get a better gut check on the get it, want it capacity. If you're not regularly working with and talking to and interacting with your direct reports, you may not even feel like you can assess if they get it, want it, and capacity to do it, right? So you need that exposure, and regular one-on-ones can just give you that exposure and give you that opportunity to get more insight into that, as well as just, reviewing scorecard and KPIs, reviewing regular to-dos, giving them feedback, setting developmental goals, all of those good things. Annual reviews are another big one, having regular scheduled times throughout the year that you recap or you touch base on performance, progress, how someone's developing, what you expect from them. Are they meeting goals? And again, really using the core values and that get it, want it capacity framework as your lens going into these reviews, and being open about that and talking about that with them. Maybe not straight up saying in that moment, you're the wrong person, you're in the wrong seat, right? But kind of understanding, do they get it? Do they want it? Do they have the capacity? And having those open conversations to help you figure that out as a leader, as well as assessing them on the core values. And if they're falling short, that's part of the feedback conversation, as well as, bringing KPIs into the mix as far as, using data, whether it's attendance, error rates, customer feedback, upsell, revenue, whatever it is pertaining to their job that their KPIs are. And then that brings us to KPI accountability. So every single role in your accountability chart should have a measurable KPI that is reviewed regularly with your direct report. Maybe weekly doesn't make sense. I mean, I think there's probably a case to meet or just to discuss, are you hitting these weekly things, whether it's, routes, whatever it's related to, calls, answering the phone, whatever it is, making sure that you have set KPIs per team and also on an individual role level. And all of those things should roll up to the company, meaning theoretically on an individual role or team level, if the team is hitting these key KPIs, this will lead to the company hitting the company's KPIs. And so this can really enable proactive management as well. You're gonna want to have both lead and lag indicators as far as KPI goes. So lead indicators would be KPIs that give you an indication that something bad is about to happen, or that performance isn't going to be good in the future, versus lag would be something that tells you what happened in the past. So you want a mix of both of those to be able to proactively anticipate performance issues at a company level, but then also be able to assess what the previous month looked like, what the previous quarter, and so forth. So you want a nice mix of those. Okay, guys, we're wrapping up, which good timing. We've got 5 minutes left. But to kind of wrap up, there's a lot of information here. I know it may seem overwhelming to some, but really to build a high performance team through EOS or whatever framework, that you choose to build your company from, it doesn't have to be just EOS. We saw it in the polls. Some people take a little bit from a lot of different business frameworks and kind of create their own, and that's totally fine. But really, I think what are some non-negotiables are that you have to define your core values and you have to wholeheartedly commit to them. I do believe you have to build those accountability charts on a role level to really establish a foundation of clarity of what each role is responsible for, what is expected, what does success look like. And once you kind of have those foundational principles, you do need to evaluate your current team based on, are they a culture fit? And then also, are they in the right seat? And using the Get It, Want It capacity framework to really assess that. And then acting swiftly and decisively on decisions, and not just during this initial evaluation phase, but on an ongoing basis. Again, if we remember, being a people-centric organization does not mean keeping people just because, you're loyal. It means keeping people that are going to contribute to your company's success, because if the company doesn't succeed, no one else will succeed. If the company doesn't succeed, people can't make more money. They can't grow, right? So at the end of the day, you need to make decisions that are going to help your company succeed. And that does not mean putting individual people ahead of the company. So key takeaways here: culture isn't fluff, it's your infrastructure, and it must be intentionally designed, actively reinforced, and consistently modeled from the top down. The right people in the right seats are the formula for strong execution and company growth. Clarity and accountability are what drive exceptional performance. And like I said, people first leadership isn't about pleasing everyone. It's about creating a culture where the right people can thrive. So I don't think we've gotten any questions in here, but I hope you guys enjoyed today's webinar. I would love to hear from you while you're still here on what topics you'd like to hear more about. Again, this is one of the first ones we did more on, leadership and people and stuff. And, we tend to lean more digital marketing focused, but I would love to hear what you would love to hear more of, whether it's more leadership and business management, digital marketing, people and culture, sales systems, financial systems. What would you like to hear more from Coalmarch? Because we want to give you content that you want to hear. So. People, culture, hiring. Love to see more on topics like this. Awesome. Cool. Well, I'm glad you'd like to see more topics on this, because I personally love to do topics like this. So, yeah, it seems like everyone's like, we've got enough digital marketing, no more digital marketing. Fair. But yeah, so that's all we got today. If nobody has any questions or thoughts that they want to pop into the chat, just want to thank you guys for being here. And I hope you walked away with, some valuable information, and at the very least, something to make you think about your team, make you think about your people, and come up with ideas on how you can be better. So thanks, everyone.